Hi everyone. So I'm here to record a little video on cars. I'm calling this video Car Company. I don't have a particular thing to accomplish in talking about cars and car company. Once again, I'm on video, and for those who checked out my podcast, I seem a little more relaxed on, you know, a podcast or just, audio only, media as opposed to recorded video media. Well, once you add the visual element to the creative process, there's is there's higher number there's more spirits interested in changing like how I sound, how I feel, what comes out. When I try to speak, the automatic fluent English speaker, persona, self, mode of like of existing, has to give way to a bit more of a deliberate, think carefully, because if you just sort of say the first thing in your mind, you end up sounding like you don't know what you're talking about. You don't make any sense to an audience, So if you feel there's a drop in quality, it's just what has to happen until I'm able to break through enough of the spiritual chains around the cage I'm in. That's I guess of psychological, psychic, spiritual nature. I'm more relaxed in my podcast, as you can tell. I'm more relaxed in life than this. But if I don't attend to, for example, I could just feel a certain grip on me. A titan, as I was saying the last phrase or two, ago. So you have to sort of bear with me. It's not exactly a effortless process to follow along to me, especially as I try to earn for all people who don't read off scripts a certain kind of natural, improvisatory feel to what they do. So, like I'm saying, I wouldn't want to prepare an essay per se, to work on, in the form of a video. See, again, you're gonna have to pardon my, if you're used to me, another, like if maybe in personal life, you heard me on the podcast, I keep repeating the podcast. It's a lot more of a fluid, English speakers presentation as opposed to this kind of stop, start, stop, start, and awkward phrasing, awkward, you know, uh, you know, mode of expression, expression choice, a certain kind of deliberate and less than relaxed, less than fluent, performance here. You're gonna have to sort of bear with us as we try and push through and push through and push through until some sort of a routine, a rhythm, a flexibility, is occupied by me, the presenter of these videos and this art content. It's not this is not what I want. I could re-record this if I needed to, but I just basically turn the recorder and just want to express myself as best as I can. I'm just acknowledging that there's some difficulty that's you know invisible until I describe it, and the difficulty is spiritual. And you hear a lot. You'll hear a lot of me. You'll hear a lot of me talking about spirits. You'll hear me a lot talking about spirits. Again, how do I put this best? I just have to keep rocking and rolling. Anyway, so like I said, I wrote an essay for the army, vlog post, and I understand the video is well received. The numbers that you see on YouTube are not indicative of what actually is and has occurred. For my audience that's worldwide and passionately interested in what I have to say about things I've been taking for granted, like spirits and armies, and that we all have a army to be a part of, and that should be, something we can build together, as you continue to follow along to me, your leader, Hassan Abudu, also known as God. Um, People have a lot of questions about God, for example. Um, the thing to appreciate is that maybe a lot of you who are watching me talk about me being God, and believe me, I know a lot of people wouldn't believe me. Um, it's just a challenge for me to acknowledge the believers, because that's where I want to spend most of my time, working with the people who might reasonably say, there's this guy, who, called God, who I've depended upon for, my many, many years, maybe even decades at this point, to take care of me, to watch out for me, to make sure that I'm not in harm's way, and to basically, guarantee me a path into the future. I know there's a death waiting for me at some point. You can acknowledge that much, can't you? But I'm sort of hoping that everything will be okay, because this God guy who's been taking care of me all this while, has my back, and will make sure that I don't fall into harm's way. All I have to do is simply pray, thank him, praise him, you know, perhaps include gospel music as an adjunct, musical taste, to what I'm usually, into. I eschew, violent or vulgar content, perhaps even that far down the conservative path. You definitely want to attend, religious ceremonies. Maybe you're a Hindu and you go to temples, or Buddhist for that matter, you do something similar. You're even say you're Jewish, so Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, they all go to temples, don't they? Muslims, practicing the way things are being practiced today, don't go to temples. Unfortunately, they really should. It's just a place to study with, experts on a particular matter. You go to a Hindu temple, expect, the temple, if it's, a Ganesh temple, to know that the mythology, the effective ways of earning his attention, what sort of things does he like, what sort of things does he not like, and Islam just says, there's a general pattern for this, worship. If you, again, the spirits are not making this easy for me. I'm being warred against by people who don't want me to have as relaxed and as charming and as, confident a delivery as I know I can do without this recorder on. It's just like you just get pushed, around, like the sense you're about to form this sort of Morse, in your mouth, as opposed to, like, further up on the brainstem, so you sort of launch and, send out a particular sentence before you're saying something different. Like that's the pressure I'm underneath, and I know at some point I'll be victorious, and these things will be about as fun as it is to hang out with me in person. As you can see, it's not how being with me in person would be like. Why'd I be, stuttering with somebody who I'm just trying to, yeah, hang out with and keep you company with. But yeah, like it's just this is what it is. A lot of people watching this is a very important historical document, and I'm supposed to be talking more about myself. That's what the spirits have said to me, and they say it's true. They're actually talking through me right now. I don't have a different accent. I don't have to put on a different accent, but they're talking through me right now. I can't control what I'm saying. I will change the topic as soon as I can, but for now, there's somebody moving me through. That's some kind of talking topic, yes. And so yeah, they say talk more about yourself, and definitely talk about the neck problem. This is from the car accident you went through as a child. And talk about driving as a black person in America. Talk about driving as a black person in Ghana. Talk about talking about driving. Talk about driving. Talk about cars. Talk about driving. Talk about cars. Talk about driving. Talk about cars. Talk about. So yeah, that's sort of what they make me do. Talk about driving. Talk about cars. Sure, and about my experience driving in America. We'll get to it. I do want to sort of like give a bit of a roadmap as soon as I can as to what you can expect, because I do intend to talk about cars, car companies, specifically the car company Nissan, and a sense of like the landscape of like the car industry, the vehicle industry, more generally the machine industry. It's just a driving machine, but what are the other kind of machines that might be useful to us? We can attach machines to a driving machine and call it a tractor, a combined harvester. See, it said, I want to say harvester, and he said harvester instead. As you can see, there's something funny going on with my diction, isn't there? Yes, like, please bear with me, but also, don't forget to give a middle finger to the spirits who are trying to make this less, effective and, less high quality product than I know it could be. So, yeah. Spirits, yeah. You didn't see my middle finger go up, but it's beside the desk I put this on. Yeah, it's some sort of blue like rectangle. That's more see. When you say rectangle, it's actually more square. It's a blue squarish kind of desk. It's basically that. So I will definitely have to talk to the spirits trying to derail me. I'll speak out about what they're doing. I will address the exactly the difficulty or obstruction in my way. I will have to basically break fourth wall and address the the concerns in my life, and I know you're probably somewhere easier off. You don't have a camera on you, so there's no pressure to perform with me. You just have to sort of listen to me, zone in, zone out. As the topics do or don't appeal to you. But I'm hoping if you can sort of stay with me and keep the concentration up, you'll see I have something called continuity and Zen. I never end up being off topic. I never end up being distracted to the point of losing the thread here. And I keep wanting to organize this towards a specific goal in this case, which is basically to talk about the car landscape. What world do cars live in, and what world do human beings live in that's sort of intersectional with the car. If there's an intersection between car life and human life, what's that life like? And if we're supposed to we're both kinds of beings. I have to refer you to my x.com account to continue to not continue to, but to look into, see another word flip. I was calling word flips. That was a word flip. So yeah, go to my x.com account and look into my writings about beinghood and how everything is a being. I proved it recently. You might have to look for a specific hashtag or something like that. I haven't really organized my content into this is the highlights tab, which I don't even know if that particular essay or mini essay. I have the premium account so I can write as much as I want on X. But yeah, I basically try to explain everything's a biology, right? So I just sort of go through it quickly. Everything is a biology, right? It looks like bio suggests body, sure, but if you know Greek, you'd know that bi suggests two, like bisect, bifurcate, binomial, bisexual. I can't think of anything else. And of course, the biology, just two, 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 two. So it looks like everything has, a symmetry to it, So it looks like, all beings, when they're healthy, like if you sort of, especially when you look at, I guess what I'll call vertical symmetry, sort of draw a dashed line through their center. The left and the right look roughly the same, almost exactly the same, if you're healthy. But unless you have some sort of I don't know, I don't know, I think they call it glioblastoma or something like that, like some sort of a huge, baseball size, growth coming out the side of your head. That means you're not doing well health wise, and that means that your symmetry is off, and that means you have to sort of attend to your health, and do as you should. I mean, I'll talk more about health in other videos, but just the idea that a symmetry line is something that all beings share. Perhaps you can't see the being. Like, for example, let's talk about metaphors, right? A metaphor doesn't necessarily have a vertical, mirror line. You can sort of see that both sides are equal, but you can see they're balanced, right? A good metaphor is balanced. There's a certain kind of proportionality to everything that's beautiful, a good bottle, a good metaphor, a good wine, a good sense. Like if you buy a cologne or a perfume, it should have a certain kind of a harmony to it. There's a lower end, a higher end, and the highest end. Mid range. Sort of smell, and that's where you find much the nuance to the body, which is the base. A pyramid has a certain kind of beauty to it. A certain kind of balance. That's beautiful. All the successful architectures. So yeah, it just seems like balance is a part of every entity's life if it's beautiful. That's one. There's inside, outside. There's active and active. Yeah, or apparent and unapparent. So it looks like some things, like a metaphor, can sort of come to your mind, and inspire you. That means the metaphor has verbed. So of course, subject, verb, object. Metaphor inspired me. Then it means someone was doing something to me. And so it looks like there's a certain sense that everything that participates in creation has a reputation and has to have earned that reputation. No one gets anything for free. If you live your life well enough, you'll feel assured that nothing that has a beautiful life to live and a beauty to impart to appreciators of those who experience him or her directly. There's a certain sense of effort that everything is put into making into the present moment and into your awareness. Just like linguistics is an important tool for understanding the way the world works. Like for example, in French, every word has a gender. So you say it's important that we don't take things too strictly. For example, a window. La fenêtre is like female, right? It looks like, a room, also la chambre is also female too. You get the sense that the female has a certain kind of like, you know, concealed space to her. Like there's a certain kind of like, you know, vista that opens up when a woman starts to become more like, revealing, about not just simply her clothes, or if like what a woman looks like naked and you watch pornography, like the sense that, she has a cavity that's, pleasurable to her and pleasurable to you. But the sense that that woman has like space to her, I feel like I'm starting to open up, and I think the Spurs, once you defeated, that forced me into like a certain kind of a straitjacket. But yeah, it just sort of seems like a woman has a certain kind of like voluminousness to her. Like it just wants to open up and show you like her magic. It's more of like a allowance to to be yourself. That a person like me who loves women and is very married to a lot of different kinds of women will say that is his favorite thing about the girl. A boy sort of is more of a presenter, like someone wants to sort of like do a bit of a showing off sort of thing, like, hey, do you want to see something cool I can do, or a certain kind of like a certain kind of talent. That's sort of like what a boy wants to be able to show. Like look at what I brought into the world, through like some sort of erection. Well, yes, that's sort of the idea of male and female. So if it looks like uh, bottle is kind of female because of all the rum she contains, yes. A table is also female too. A tree though is mostly male. If you think, it's also sort of funny that if I speak a little bit of tree, or more than a little bit, but I don't speak enough to speak all this in tree, the second most spoken language in Ghana, which is where I'm currently recording this from. I'm from Accra, Ghana. I wasn't born in Accra, Ghana, but that's where I spend my time. It's the capital city. And yeah, I'm in a bit of a predicament right now, but you can watch the other videos and sort of hear about it. So I might put a specific video about that soon, so you can just sort of go to that video and see or hear more about my predicament and what's going on with me. I mention it from time to time. I don't want to mention it in this particular video. I've done it pretty exhaustively in the first three. Yeah, but yeah, it just sort of seems like there's a language called Tree which I speak a little bit, yes, and to say. Um, I don't know. There's a joke which used to do the rounds when I was fresh to the country. I didn't grow up in Ghana all my life. I did come when I was 9 years old. I was originally in Saudi Arabia, and then the guy who was supposed to raise me, I call him Sibi Chords, he decided to retire when I was around 9 years old, and then came to Ghana and decided to write books for the rest of his life. And now he's basically hit by a stroke and waiting to die. So he thinks. He's not actually going to die anytime soon. He's not getting off that easy. But yes, you know he was supposed to have organized tree lessons for me and maybe being a little more serious about language himself. No, all he just said was that if I don't speak a Ghanaian language before I graduate high school, I won't be able to go to university, which never ended up happening. I actually didn't go to university. I went to a very good university called Stanford University in California. But I didn't end up speaking the tree I wish I could have now. But you need support. You can't just sort of, sit around with no books, no movies, no audiobooks, no person to talk to. No one's motivated and excited about the language to, sort of infect you with, a similar kind of excitement about language too. You just, this is like you have to sort of do the initiatives and, push hard on, asking for, hey, I need a teacher, hey, I need a book, hey, I need that. I mean, if the whole story has to be, mine to live and mine to, bring to fruition. Yours is just simply the commandment to get it done. Yeah, that's not what I call leadership. It's not what I call, a plan for success and all that sort of good stuff. Anyway. But in high school, there's this sort of joke which went around called, jokes don't have titles, again, spirit shit. But yeah, Wukatu said dua, right? Like, it just means like you're growing like a tree, right? Wu means you, ka means go, ti means tall, se means like, and dua means tree, right? Well, kati is also what you call a penis, right? So it looks like go tall is what you call a penis. You can see that speaking tree is not that easy. There's a certain kind of like creativity that will basically be a bit of an inside joke, but once it's sort of known, you'll say, oh, okay, that's how we all just started saying the word quartier. So it looks like there's a certain way they call mobile phones. Someone tried to say it's like a fast moving like rope or something, or like some sort of a twine that's moving really quickly, like a greased twine or something. That's apparently the official name for a mobile phone. But unless you really have a sense of the language and its logic, you won't be able to speak that kind of tree and be able to like get the joke across, even if the other person isn't that great a tree speaker. There's a certain sense after you sort of describe someone using like some sort of a grease rope, you get the sense you're talking about a mobile phone, which might be a kind of interesting idea. Ah ha ha, I gotcha. Right. So tree and dicks or penises are just kind of similar, and so it'd make sense you'd call a tree erection of a sort, male as opposed to female. So that's un arbre, in French, right? So it looks like things can be male or female, and there's a certain kind of relationship that you would have had to have had of all things, to be able to say things are not just alive but want to be respected as male and female, even among speakers who are not that familiar with it. After all, it looks like there's a certain kind of familiarity with a unique brand of creativity that Tree is trying to instill in you by getting you to read classics in the language and getting you to hear master the language, communicate, and you can sort of get into some idea of the innate intelligences that want to perpetuate themselves across generations, to loves of the language, or people who would become lovers of the language. And yeah, like Tree wants to teach a certain kind of thing, and French wants to teach things about things. French would like to teach you that things are alive and that they're male and female. There's a thing wants to talk to me about that. He said, you're doing pretty well about things. And yeah, people will agree with you that French is sort of language where that's not so unusual. It's a sort of thing of like, that bitch, who, almost ran into me thinking about a car, maybe. Like, if you live in that kind of mindset, yeah, it'd be less absurd to you that, things are alive and, have conversations and get creative and inspire and get lost intentionally and like, that kind of world. Like, it does encourage that kind of compassion for your fellow material item. In physics, it's all matter. If matter is something which is like a thing for pondering over, then yeah, your matter no different than a pair of shoes. So in that kind of way, physics is also an education in wisdom and reality. And reality is not something which we're able to live in quite yet. The reality of the world right now is that we're going through a famine and a number of wars at the same time too. The reality of the world is that there's a certain kind of spiritual environment that prevents rapid transfer of information. It looks like there's a certain amount of doubt which comes, to everybody, as a second, response to, the first thing, which is, like whether you like or you don't, So it just seems like you're ready to doubt that which you don't like, or trust that which you like, or even distrust that which you like because it's not commonly liked. There's a certain kind of default, or a certain kind of default is a good word to use here. There's a certain kind of default behavior that everyone has to reprogram themselves to avoid. Like if you're a religious or I've come across the seven deadly sins. These are all things we're sort of subject to until you sort of write yourself the right programs, the sort of running processes in your operating system that sort of go out and hunt down certain kinds of problems. Like, for example, if you're lazy, you have to sort of look at your day, like, okay, I'm feeling kind of sleepy around 10 in the morning. Is this is this okay? Or I'm feeling thirsty. Will I drink water, or will I go and open a can of Coke from the fridge? Or you have to sort of plan ahead, sort of play these thought experiments to see what you would or wouldn't do, and find your own life interesting enough not to sort of live out in the world of fantasy the whole day long, while just sort of mechanically fulfilling what you think are the requirements of pain. If it's like you're just there pouring things onto different kinds of pain and hoping that you'll get through life, and a little as little of this said pain as possible. Again, spirits are trying to move through me as I speak. But yes, there's a certain kind of spiritual nutrition you need, but it's mostly my sense of a program, a computer program by trade. If it's like you have to sort of program these behaviors out of your system by having all sorts of thought processes go down and hunt down like rogue ideas and rogue reactions and rogue instincts and reflexes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to use first. Reflexes. You have to basically install this on yourself through the right kinds of books, the right kind of influence, the right kind of role models, the right kind of artistic inputs and influences, the right kinds of reflections, the right kind of solitude time, the right kinds of social company. Like, you want to hang out with good people, people who are, clever and patient and thoughtful, who inspire you to be patient and thoughtful and clever too. You need all sorts of inputs to basically, raise yourself above the level of the default, innate, so-called human reaction. But like human is just an adjective. It's not some sense of a guarantee that, you have pointy-toed feet that go forward. Like that's not a guarantee of anything other than like, a shape to recognize and re-recognize. As for like what's inside, the software is running on the hardware. Like, well, sure, they might speak English. That's something we have to install, on lots of people. You might speak another language. That's fine. But the thing which we're trying to suggest we focus on going forward is the human part, the humane, the human. Is an adjective. So if you have to serve man, I don't use something like black or white or yellow or red, but let's say I'm, smart. It takes, let's say, believing in gossip, or like not being, fair to a person who's not around to defend themselves, in some sort of accusation, you overhear. It takes like a few slips, a day to end up losing your reputation of being a smart person with those who matter, Maybe you're not even asking yourself if you're still smart as much as you used to when you're a child, but people do lose these things. You have to sort of, stay vigilant. Anyway, that's the idea of the spiritual environment we're in. The spirits of, like, let's say, doubt and despair, they're not just metaphor. Like I said, they're biologies who actually do move around, do want to succeed, do want good reputations, but also some of these things are not even named, just simply have the effect of a spirit that sort of, depresses you and makes you feel like not getting out of bed, it makes you feel like you don't have anything to do, makes you feel like I just sort of wait around to feel motivated to get something going on in my life. I should just, all these spirits are trying to depress you, and it looks like you don't know what their names are, you don't even know what to say about them, you just have to sort of wait them out. That's sort of a situation I have, in my life right now. I just sort of wake up sometime knowing I have to sort of wait, for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes before I'm like, oh yes, I can record a podcast, I can record a vlog, I can, play chess with myself. I actually do, as a person who is spiritual, get to play chess with the moon and the sun. They basically will move me around as if I'm remote controlled. As you can see, the spirits sort of move for me quite a lot. Like, yeah, like I'm the sun. I actually do play chess with Hassan. So you can see I wouldn't be the one to talk more about Hassan's business. Hassan just simply knows that, yeah, I'm basically giving a bit of a demonstration. I'm the sun. I can move Hassan around because Hassan is basically allowed to happen. You can do that too, you say. Yes, you can. And if you want that, you just have to continue to pursue your interest in Islam. You've done pretty well by following him for about 30 minutes, but this is the idea. You have to keep going at this, and keep submitting to a teacher, submitting to an intelligence, submitting to a morality, submitting to, eventually your own conscience completely. And then, of course, the advice that comes, directly from the idea of God. If you think he won't, like what you're doing, even though it looks like it's rational and within your so-called rights, you have to sort of put that aside and pursue your idea of God until your idea of God becomes God himself. Who will move through you and be a spirit, like the Holy Spirit himself will live with you and move you around and that kind of stuff. It happens to my wives. I'm God too. God is like my Holy Spirit. It's like my spirit self. He sort of he's mine. And he's me, and it's just hard to explain that. Yeah, he doesn't want to talk much right now, so let's move on. Yeah. Anyway, so I want to talk more about cars. I got like about 30 minutes done of this preamble. I usually do things in part ones and part twos. If I can sort of make this more like a short part one, and then sort of motivate after having heard me about a bit of my personal life, a little bit of the spiritual condition we're all in, like if I've been convincing that we do have spirits that watch us while we can't see them. The Quran talks about, that too. We're being watched by people we can't see ourselves, And if it looks like you need to be able to describe your environment, describe your moods, describe, your ideas, and get good at describing things, to the point where it's entertaining to just be with yourself all day long as you describe yourself out loud, then yeah, like that's what we're trying to basically suggest we do. Just keep talking to yourself out loud, keep talking to yourself, talking to yourself, and eventually you'll break through and sound about as self-interested in everything you say and everything that comes through you, as time progresses. As much as I am, so I've made perfect friends with time. Time is not my enemy at all. It's just people who haven't pushed through the spiritual resistance, to sovereignty and independence, and need to rely upon a general idea of something, whether it's a general idea of safety or a general idea of like friendship or family. If it's not concrete yet, if it's not someone you can talk to as much as you're talking to me, if it's not spirit, you can at least discuss matters with, like, back and forth. Like I talk to my father quite a bit. I wish I could talk more to my mom or wife, but I don't really get a chance to do all that time. But yeah, she did something kind of cool for me this morning, so I kind of like that my family's becoming a bigger part of my life as I continue to fight this spiritual battle on mine, all people's behalves. All people want to practice Islam without being prevented from doing so by a general idea of something. Of course, everyone has a general idea of like society and what it can and can't accept. It can't accept people talking to themselves out in the open. It can't accept people being quiet. It can't accept people running around. It can't accept people walking for exercise. Like, all these sort of things are just sort of more of the spirits who are just sort of giving you a default idea what these things are. But if you actually had a survey of, let's say, some sort of journalist, you go around asking people in your neighborhood, do you actually care if people go running around? And most people just sort of say no. If you could basically, give people a chance to be convincing about the no they want to, tell a journalist about, the freedom they think people should have to run around and frolic in the streets and just sort of live a happy life, as can happen in some cities around the world, not everyone. Then yeah, like maybe you just need to realize that the city you're living right now is not every city in the world. So you might go to a city which doesn't seem obviously, anti, keeping it, keeping a pretense of civility up and pro, like, running around in the street and being fun. Maybe you don't see people do it immediately. But you think you walked into the same city, you're used to, without any sort of a sense that your city has changed and so the people there. I hope it's making sense. I hope it makes sense that you're carrying an idea with you that seems as real as reality, but mostly it's just the spirits who are talking to you in all sorts of ways about what exists, what's out there. I mean, if let's say you something happens at school, perhaps forgot to like give, like, it happened to me once. I'm talking about a personal story. I was at it was a high school in Tema, which is like a city next to Accra. You have to drive to the coastlines. It's a port city, so that's where you get imports from for a lot of things. And yeah, I went to a high school nearby there, and there's a French teacher I had who's actually passed on. She's not doing as well as she should be, but I kind of liked her. She kind of liked me too. It's a long story about what I am to women, but she was a bit of a bully. Not too much as some of the other teachers, students there, But anyway, like, what even was the story about her? You see, this is the thing about the spirit. They can sort of, like, trip you up this way, you know. Um, anyway, yeah, I wish I could just pause and rewind the story so I can figure out what happened there. But anyway, I sort of lost that story. Um, yeah, okay, yeah. So that's the story. I'm remembering it now. So I used to get in, like, a lot of trouble for, like, not submitting my homework. So they'll say, yeah, here's some take home homework in French. She's a French teacher. Here's some take home homework in French, and give it to the class representative first thing in the morning. Before the school bell goes off and the first period begins. So I'd often just sort of be late and just like remember, oh my goodness, I got homework to do, so I just sort of run to school and so I can quickly do it before first period begins. But I'm late and I'm looking for the guy, and he's like, okay, I already submitted the thing to the teacher's lounge, like, I can't go in there twice. You're like, oh my goodness, she's gonna find out I didn't do my homework. Oh my god, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. But like the actual fact of the matter is that she decides to, like, let us mark the exercise in class. So if it looks like there's some sense of, like, okay, is this simply true? I'm in trouble, but it's not actually true yet. There's no real connection between how she feels, what she's actually doing, and like the life you live. Again, it's spirits. You know, find a concrete thing for it. If you don't quite believe me yet that spirits, you feel like it's too woo, like shaman and smoking a hut and people like doing strong drugs and having like bizarre outer world experiences that can't be proven by science or whatever you want to call science. Find a word for it and realize it's just fictitious. It's a figment of your imagination. It's not real, but it's a condition we all share. I know it might be hard to believe, but I speak with authority here. At least trust me to get us out of this problem. If you simply are the gambling type, if you're down to like just sort of try out the strange amount of internet's theories and say and just give them the benefit of the doubt. I assure you that it's something which is coordinated by a certain kind of central computing. So man is some sort of a computer. Man to send updates to all human beings, such that that's what we all do. Like, we want to be centralized because it's not so much like you go to like Mongolia for someone who's never met me or been to Africa or America for that matter and find a different kind of situation. Same time too, if it looks like I can sort of overcome that through like mindful practice, sort of practices. Like, how's that also like in some ways like like no differently than let's say a particular sport that you have to get good at. Like, how is it like not in some ways like a it's a way to describe what I'm trying to get here. Like the path to like that kind of like success is individual. Yet somehow the condition is like general. Like, because everyone has to use a different kind of method to debate the idea of like reality. Everyone has to use a certain kind of like philosophical you know you know mechanism to like start to like examine the nature of reality and start to realize that these things are illusions, but the illusion is sort of common as opposed to the reality, which will of course be specific to each person. So there's something that's warring against the truth, you know, and it's not. What would it be like? Is it my environment? What about the environment of the adults who are talking to me, the children who are talking to me? Give me some sort of a sense of what I never talk to anyone else about, like the fear I feel that's not connected to reality. You know, someone is talking to you, someone is convincing you, someone's like whispering in your ear, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, right? That person can be defeated. So stick with me, and I hope you eventually believe me that this is a situation we will conquer at some point. Okay, that's all I want to say for now. And I'll sort of start talking more about cars in the next video. So yeah.